So welcome to In Talks with Tamsin. Tonight I'm joined by Dhyan. Dhyan is a spiritual leader, classes herself as a high priestess and has run over 200 events and uses her gifts to help many people, including people with cancer, drug addictions and insomnia. And so we're going to hear all about Dhyan's life and the work that she does. So without further ado, welcome, Dhyan.
Hi, Tamsin. Thanks so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah,
yes, my
likewise.
name is Dhyan.
We've had a few technical issues here, so we're just trying to cool down. So, yeah, so it's very, very grateful for you to be here, very blessed to connect to you, and very fascinated by your bio that you sent me about a week ago when we decided that we were going to do this. So why don't we just start with how your week's been first, and then we'll progress to a bit more about what you do.
Well, this week has had its challenges. Definitely had its challenges, but I've got something very unusual has come up for next week. I can't actually speak about it yet, but yeah, something that has come out of nowhere. But I think that's life, isn't it? What I've noticed from my own experience is when we go through really challenging times, and we can kind of get to a point where we just have to surrender to whatever's going on. And then it seems that life just opens up and shows us more possibilities. And it's that need to just take that step back and let go and stop trying to control everything. And I think when, like me, when you're running events, when you've got different things going on that you're responsible for, it can be very easy to get in the mindset of trying to make everything work in the way that you need it to. But we just have to be open to letting the universe take some control over that, and not kind of fighting and pushing. You know, it can feel sometimes a bit like pushing a boulder up a hill, and it's like, don't do it. Just relax and let go, and allow the universe to do its thing, to create its magic. And it will, when we give it the opportunity.
Totally, and that's so pertinent for my experience, especially this week. And sometimes you do just have to sit down and say, okay, yeah, what do I need to listen to, or what do I need to do? And oftentimes it's just to be still, isn't it, really, and just be calm and wait for it to sort of slot in, and we can be so busy with our daily life. So yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, it sounds exciting, whatever it is that you're up to, and hopefully we'll find out soon. Why don't we go back to the beginning, if we may, then? I'm interested, and I'm sure the viewers will be, to know a little bit more about who Dhyan is and what's led you to where you are today. Can we go back to your early years, Dhyan?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far back as I can remember, I had magical experiences as a child. I had very vivid dreams. I had experiences of kind of beings turning up in my room at night and flying over the local houses. I can't explain any of this, of course, and it felt extremely real. So to me, you know, I was having very extraordinary psychic experiences from a very young age. And as a 6-year-old, I had my first kind of awakening, as it were. And I was actually at school being bullied because, according to my teacher at the time, I couldn't read, I couldn't write, and I just wasn't very good at anything. So I was very much in my own world. And although I was obviously surrounded by other children, I was often on my own, doing my own thing. And there was this one day, And I don't know if it was because the writing was big on the wall that I could read it, or what, what that was about, because I did struggle with quite a lot of words. I actually was diagnosed with a bit of dyslexia as a young child. So somebody had written something on the wall which really upset me, and it was about me. And I went to another part of the playground on my own, and I remember just being so upset and angry at the other children for treating me that way, and not really knowing what to do. I didn't feel like I could go to one of the teachers, because I don't think my teacher really liked me very much at the time. And when I was stood in this part of the playground away from everybody else, I felt the wind blowing around me, and it seemed to be soothing me. So, and as a child, we just play, don't we? We play, we have this magical connection with everything. And that seemed to be really highlighted in those moments. So I began to play with the wind, and I asked the wind to blow, and it blew, and I asked it to stop, and it stopped. And so I recognized this kind of symbiosis, if that's the right word, between me and the wind and the breeze around me, and the way it was calming me. And I was really moving just into this space of just being, just being calm, knowing that I was looked after, knowing that there was something bigger than this little me that was interacting with me, that I was a part of. And as I looked around, the trees were huge because I was only little, and I just felt like everything was a part of that, and that I was a part of everything. It was just a recognition, in a very kind of mystical way, but in a very innocent way as a child, of course. And so this changed something within me. I think it kind of planted a seed, and in those moments, I just didn't really care what the children had said anymore. It was just inconsequential. It was all about the way I was connected to nature and what I was experiencing in those moments. And it was really beautiful, really simple, natural, and just so comforting. Comforting is probably a good word.
That sounds really nice. It seems that you were very much aware of something bigger than yourself, and it's lovely that you felt that protection by the sounds of it. And you mentioned that you were bullied. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think it was more that they, I don't know who it was that wrote this on the wall. It's a very long time ago now. And I think it was more that I was being ostracized for being different, for being put in a different area so that I could learn how to write and read, I guess, and just being separated. So I think from the choices that the teacher and the school made by separating me from the rest of the group, the children saw me as separate from the rest of my class, and then that made me a bit of a target. So I think it was more of that, really. So on that particular day, the bullying was words being written about me, essentially. Yeah.
Right, okay.
But also just being left on my own most of the time, not really having the other kids not really wanting to play with me or be around me. So it wasn't bullying as in they physically hurt me. It was more just being left to my own devices, really. But I didn't fit in, and I always felt that from a very, very young age.
Yeah, it seems to be a very common thread in this spiritual community, or truth community, however you want to call it. It definitely seems that that is the common thread, that the black sheep of the family, were always feeling different, ostracized, and it's quite difficult to deal with that as the youngster. But it's lovely to hear that you had, or you felt, that sort of protection at least.
Yeah, I did. I think my senses were very heightened. I was very aware of lots of things all the time. But within that, there was this, from that particular experience, that was very strong sense of I'm not on my own. I am connected to everything. There is some force that with, that is with me, that is interacting with me. And I'm just very aware that it was a very beautiful experience.
It cut out at what seemed to be a crucial moment there. So I don't know if you could just
Oh,
repeat the last sentence, Dhyan, sorry.
I said it was that I was a part of it and it was a part of me. In that experience, feeling the wind and playing with the wind and the breeze, there was a deep knowing that I was very much connected with everything around me. And that was just really comforting. It kind of didn't really matter about anything else. That was what I needed to know, that I was actually connected to everything, and everything was connected to me. And up until that point, I don't think I really knew that.
And just sort of picking up on the conversations that we've had up to the running of this interview, we're entitling this as Awakening Love. And it just struck a chord with me when you were saying that, you're feeling this sense of protection. Did it feel like this unconditional love, which obviously
Hmm.
outweighs any fear and things like that? I'm just wondering, because you named, I believe what you said, your company as Awakening Love. Had that theme been present from a young age, and were you aware of that?
Yes, actually. When I was really young, and I don't know if it was before that experience or afterwards, who knows, but I had a very strong sense that I wanted to, and that I would live in a world that was full of harmony and love, where everyone got on with each other. This was like a kind of seed within me that I don't know how I knew, but I just knew that that was something that I wanted to see in my experience in my lifetime.
Right.
Interestingly enough, it did actually unfold in a way that no child would have expected, or anyone for that matter. And I feel that I have spent most of my life so far attempting to create that vision, that feeling, that sense of not only connection, but a real deep community love of everyone getting on with each other. But I know it's not that simple. I
No,
also
it
know
definitely
that
comes
now.
with challenges. And for any viewers that aren't aware or familiar with the term high priestess, it's something that you would describe yourself as, and that falls into what you were just saying, this sort of calling. Can you just explain exactly what that is?
Yeah, so for me, many years ago in my 20s, I dedicated my life to God. I actually dedicated my life to helping others know who they are at the deepest core of their being, and helping others to heal themselves. And I dedicated my life to this. I think I was perhaps, I don't know, in my early 20s, I would say, maybe even slightly younger. And it was just, again, something within me that I knew that I was maybe part of my path, you could say, or part of the process of becoming who I am. But there was definitely a need to help and assist and do what I could in whatever way. Maybe call it altruistic, maybe. People that used to say that I was very altruistic, and I still am, but I think I've also become a little bit more cynical now as well as the years have gone by. Because, I've witnessed a lot now, and I know it isn't all love and light, and it's not all easy. And I would never sit here and say that there aren't challenges, even when you've had awakenings and you've had mystical experiences, and there are challenges in life. As long as we're in the body, there are going to be challenges in our experience, and some will be easier than others, and some we might prefer more than others. But it is a part of being a human being, living in a body, as it were.
Yes, thank you. That's really nicely put. So with your early years, then you mentioned to me that you moved to Oregon in the USA at the age
Yes.
of 7, I believe it was. Was it 7? And
Yeah.
that you had this your first spiritual awakening, and I find this fascinating. I've been through an awakening myself, but I couldn't ever imagine having that experience so young, but also the awareness that that's what it is. And my question, I'd love you to obviously explain your experience there, but I'm really curious to understand is, did you know that that was a spiritual awakening at the time, that's that young age?
Well, I think for me, what I understand now was having that awakening at school on that specific day. And then it seemed not long after that, we were then all going, me and my family were all going to Rajneeshpuram in the Oregon desert for 3 months to live on Osho's commune there with quite a few other 100 people.
Wow.
So for me, looking back now from an adult perspective, we could say, it appears that awakening and that realization and connection that I felt as a child at school, I was then given the opportunity to explore that more in the setting in Oregon, essentially, where we were chanting mantras every morning. I mean, I was only there for 3 months. As a family, we were there for just 3 months. Many people were there a lot longer. But obviously it stays in my mind because it was profoundly different to what I was used to. We left our home, we left everything. We sold the house, and we all went with, I don't even think we booked tickets home. We just went, and that was it. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And for me, it was a lovely experience. Most of it was beautiful, and there were some challenges. My sister ended up having to have a serious operation because she fell over with a glass bottle. I had issues with my health because it was very dusty there. But apart from that, being in the middle of the desert, surrounded by mountains, living in A-frames with hundreds of other people around, and no street lights. So at night, you could see all the stars. It was just, the sky was just incredible at night. I remember that so clearly because I used to just love staring at the sky. I think it was there that I really learned to meditate. We used to listen to Osho discourses. He was in silence at the time, but we all used to go into Buddha Hall and listen to discourses and meditate and sit. And I would often fall asleep as well. And then every morning we would meditate and chant the Gachami mantras. And it was a real kind of grounding in the spiritual life. Looking back now, again from an adult perspective, it was very much a time of freedom. I mean, as a 7-year-old, I was on my own most of the time, which is highly unusual. Most children would not experience that. So my dad was an electrician. He worked as an electrician there, and he worked about 12 hours a day. My mum, she worked in the washroom, which is where all the washing was getting done. And of course, there was hundreds of people, so there was a lot of washing. And so everyone had their jobs. Everyone had, even the children, both my sisters went to the farm every day. I was supposed to be, I say supposed to, I didn't go. I was supposed to be working in a one boutique. I don't think there was many shops, but I was, meant to be working in this one boutique, and that was literally just me. I think I was the only child that was supposed to be working there. But for me, it was far more interesting to go getting on the bus and wandering around Buddha Hall and finding the river and finding people, well, huts that had been kind of constructed out of some wood, and just literally just wandering around doing my own thing all day. There we had like specific times in the day where everyone would eat. So there was a huge outdoor kitchen, I suppose you could say, and people would just go there and get their breakfast, get their lunch, get their dinner. So I somehow knew when that was happening. Now I can't remember any of this, of course, but I would go and I would get my food, and there'd be people all lined up with these huge pots full of vegetarian food. The food was amazing. Most of it was grown on the ranch. It was called the ranch for like short. That's what everyone used to refer to it as. And that was just so unusual, of course, because as a little 7-year-old, you'd be going into the kitchen and your mum's cooking your dinner, and that wasn't my experience at that time. For those 3 months, it was very much, I'm going to, I can't even think what it would have been called, maybe the canteen or something, and it was all outdoors. The tables were outdoors. We had, I think it had like wooden roofs. It was a huge place, big enough to feed quite a few hundred people. And yeah, that's really how I spent my days. When we arrived, it was cold, but it seemed to warm up quite quickly. And it was just a magical experience for me, really. And I think definitely a place for me to integrate those experiences as a 6-year-old. It almost feels now, and from a logical perspective, looking back, that it was just kind of a continuation of a theme that was my life, that was unfolding in ways just very naturally, but very unusually, because there wasn't anybody else I knew that was kind of doing these things.
It sounds fascinating. Firstly, I'm quite curious to know how you quote unquote ended up there in the first place. What's your relationship with your mother? You've mentioned your father's an electrician, but how does somebody from England end up in Oregon to have this experience? Like, are your parents quite spiritual, and how did that really unfold?
Yeah, so there's so much backstory to all of this. Some of it isn't, it's not that pleasant really, but
Okay.
My mum was actually, she was really into yoga. She was very spiritual from a young age, and she got into yoga, and somebody just mentioned Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, which is Osho, his commune in America And my mum decided that she would really like to go. She'd like to investigate. And so she actually went on her own, first of all, and she went for a couple of weeks. And I think she enjoyed her time there, but when she came back, she didn't want to go back again particularly. But by this point, my dad really wanted to go. So he persuaded my mum that we should all go as a family. And that's how we ended up there. So there was a lot of pressure from my dad really on my mum to go back out there. And yeah, it's quite hard talking about it, to be honest, because my dad was he did struggle with his emotions a lot. He was quite a closed person, and he would get quite angry. And as time's gone on, as I've got older, and you know, my mum's let me know more things, it became clear that things were not all roses. I had a difficult relationship with him, and my mum's experiences were not always brilliant either. So there was, you know, a bit of manipulation involved in us going over there. But what I will say is, for my dad, who left his body in 2013, he needed that experience. He needed that experience because he needed to connect with his heart. He needed to work through his anger and whatever else he got going on. And he needed to find a way to heal himself. And it seemed, as things unfolded through our life, that was his path. He needed that path. And when we came back to the UK, my dad left quite soon afterwards. So it was very clear that he wanted to leave the family, and he was ready to find himself and go on a completely different journey. And of course, none of us had expected that to happen, not really. And so that was a huge thing for me and my sisters and my mum, of course, as it is for anyone that goes through that. It was a really challenging time. Yeah. And my dad, so.
Yeah, no, it sounds fascinating. So I was just working out the timeline. So you went over to Oregon in 81, and then you moved back to the UK. Am I right in thinking you was only there 3 months, did you say?
Yeah,
in
3
America?
months. Yeah. But not long after we came back, I was 8. So if I work that out, I think we went in the sort of early spring. So that's probably why it was still cold. And then we were there for a little bit of the summer. So I don't know exactly when that was now. But.
Yeah, but it's interesting, like this sort of polarity then. So going back to the school age feeling maybe isolated in some ways, but then having this sort of spiritual protection and that awareness, and having this completely, well, not random experience, but out there experience by most people's sort of ideals, really, especially at that time. And then fast forward into where you are today, it doesn't seem far-fetched to think, well, you were already sort of tapping into this path that was going to unfold for you. But seems just very different to most other people's childhoods. So it's just very interesting. Just working forward a bit then. So, you know, you growing up, what were you doing age 18, for example? Can you take us back to that time?
So, so much happened.
Okay.
I'm going to have to fill you in briefly on a couple of
Yes,
other
please
things.
do. Yes.
So when when we came back from America, I went to a new school, And then I wasn't there long before I went to what we call a middle school. I don't even think they exist anymore, but they did back in the day. And when I was 12, we went to live in France for 2 years. My mum met someone
Okay.
else. And as a family, we then went to live in France. I went to an international school in Paris. And then when I was 14, we moved to Spain for 6 months. Came back to the UK. I think we were back in the UK for about 12 months. And then both me and my two sisters went to live with my dad in Devon. So it was kind of his turn. I mean, we didn't see it like that at the time, but it was his turn to have some time with us as teenagers. So when I was 18, I was actually living in Devon.
Wow.
Yeah, I was living in Devon. I was studying foundation fashion and textiles at Barnstaple College, and I had a few major things happen at age 18. Actually, I had a car crash, and I became quite ill with pneumonia. And I know why that would have been, because of all the emotional stuff that led up to being in Devon and the challenges that we'd all gone through, me and my sisters, and the challenges of being abandoned as such by my dad as a young child. He did come back into our lives, but it wasn't until two years or so later. So from the age of 8 to 10, I didn't see my dad. And then as a 15-year-old, there was an abandonment wound from my mum as well. So it was, and we all, not just me, but both of my sisters, we all went through that, and we all dealt with it in very different ways. And it really did have a real impact on us all, emotionally, mentally, physically. But the interesting thing was, my dad was still very much into Osho, as he was now known at this time. And we lived up the road from an Osho school where there was some children there. And we were kind of plunged into a small village in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, so it was quite an unusual experience what happened, because we went from being in a town near a city with lots of friends who we'd known since we were quite young, to living in the countryside in the middle of Devon, really, and going to a school a few miles away where nobody really knew who we were. And we just had to, again, it was like starting again. We needed to fit in and find our way, really, all of us. And at this point, I was very much into art. I was very much I was still very much into the spiritual aspect. So we had books, Osho books around the house. My dad had lots of pictures of Osho around the house. I always giggle about this because my sisters were quite concerned. If they had friends around, they were like, what are we going to say about this guy that we've got pictures of all around the house? And I just made a joke and said, we can say it's granddad or something. There's the old man with a white beard, like classic.
Yeah.
As it turned out, it really didn't matter. I mean, I honestly, I didn't feel that there was an issue there with it at all. But my sisters, they did. They were just more conscious of that in some way. And so it ended up being an exploration for me of meeting so many people who were healers and therapists, because where our house was, we often had people staying. sometimes staying and looking after us, and sometimes, sorry about that, I might have to pop that out. Could you hear that noise? Sorry.
No, I didn't hear anything. It just slightly went a bit quieter, but no, it's all good.
Oh, okay, great. It was so loud.
Oh,
Right, so I've lost my train of thought now. I apologize.
that's okay.
Yeah,
So you're
so
saying you're in Devon,
yeah,
Osho, picked on the wall, that's
yeah.
where we got
So
to.
pictures on the wall, and we finding ourselves in a small, not even really a town, it's so tiny, a small village, and not really knowing if there's anyone else in the village. There's a school up the road, which is an Osho school, and there are lots of children there who've come from India and all over the world. But again, we're not really connected. They're there, but we're kind of living at my dad's, and so there was a lot of people that were coming and going. There were people that were looking after us, because at the time my dad was actually working in London. So we grew up quite quickly. As a 15-year-old, I was learning, how to wash my clothes and do dishes. And my dad would employ people to get the food shopping done, because we weren't driving at that point, of course. So we were just, learning how to be teenagers, learning how to do things for ourselves. And we had a great time, to be honest. There was a lot of children in the village, and the village that was close to us, there was a lot of kids there as well. We seemed to get on with them quite well, most of them. There was a lot of partying that happened. There was a lot of music. There was, yeah, it was a good time, to be honest. Definitely.
Oh, it sounds nice. And I had a look on your YouTube account, and so for anybody watching, Dhyan's got a plethora of videos, which I'm going to enjoy looking through the back catalogue, if you like. And I came across one from 2020 or 21, and you were chatting with Mark Atwood, and so that piqued my interest because I've been following him for some time. Um, Really curious about the story you was telling about, I guess this would be your second awakening. And you mentioned, I've just really related to it and connected to it. And you said, although it's not the same as mine, obviously, but you said that you felt this energy, and it was as if the whole world was in a teacup. And I'm just really
Mm.
curious, and I'm sure the viewers will be, this, which I would relate as a Kundalini awakening. I don't know if you would call it the same. But would you be able to just talk us through your experiences there, and tell us, what that was like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So back then, this would have been 2012, I think, or maybe slightly later. No, it would have been 2012. Yeah. So in 2012, I actually had an awakening, and then in 2013, I had another one. So it would be the one for 2013, in actual fact.
Okay.
So what happened was, I was organizing an event. I was connected to lots of different spiritual teachers at this time. They were just all, I don't know what was going on, but the universe was just bringing me and them, connecting us all on social media in one way or another. And this seemed to be a real theme for me. So the events that I was doing, I'd had this awakening, but I was bringing in other people because I didn't feel quite ready to share, and things hadn't fully matured within me at that point. I didn't realize that there was more to come. So what happened was, one day, I had so much going on in my head all the time. Had a difficult relationship which ended, and then I was very much suffering with all of that. I was suffering with the connection, with the the relationship, the way it had broken down, the way I was being treated, the way I was thinking about the way I was being treated and what I was feeling. And all of this was adding up to me being very much in my head and very, very upset a lot of the time and not knowing what to do and feeling kind of worthless and useless. And I was a young mom, and I just plowed all my energy into my son at that time because I felt very on my own, and what I was going through, it just felt like there wasn't really enough support somehow. There were people around me that were supporting me, but it was me that really had to get myself out of that, and I didn't really know how. So one day I went upstairs into my room. I was really upset, and I just got on the floor, and I don't know, how I reached this point, but I knew I wasn't going to take my own life. I knew that, but there was something within me that knew there was more. Knew there was more to life, and knew that I just needed to, I don't know, I needed to get some kind of reassurance. Anyway, so I got on the floor in my room, put my hands together, closed my eyes, and just said, God, please show me another way. I know there's another way to live. I can't live like this anymore. Please show me another way to live. And I, in that moment, without realizing what I was doing, I fully surrendered to life. I just gave it all up. And it wasn't a conscious thought. I didn't think, oh, right, I'm going to surrender now. It was, that's it. I'm done. I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to think. I don't know what else I'm supposed to do at this point. And something miraculous happened. Within 24 hours, I was plummeted into a space of bliss. There were no worries, no concerns. Nothing fazed me anymore. I didn't care what somebody said or didn't say. My ex specifically in those circumstances. Nothing could touch that bliss that I'd found within myself. And it was so sudden and so unexpected, and I was so aware of it that I was consciously just kind of saying to myself, right, don't hold on to it, don't try and hold on to it. It's beautiful, it's here, don't push it away, but don't try and hold on to it either, because it could go the same way that it came. And this kind of sat with me and permeated my whole being. And over the course of 12 months and what was to become more and more events that I was organizing, this became the place from which everything was being created and manifested. And I had I was given information in meditations to start a group, and all of this was just kind of all blowing together. I knew, I had realizations that there was more for me, more than the four walls of the house. There was a world out there that somehow I hadn't fully let in either. So it was a real time of shifting from being in my head and suffering and worrying about everything and feeling just like I'd run out of ideas, to finding myself in this beautiful space of bliss and being that in my events and leading from that place. And as I say, I was trying not to hold on to it, push it away. I just was finding a balance with being with it. And I was so, so grateful that this was happening. And I didn't expect there to be anything else. you know, that was enough for me. That was enough. And then sort of 12 months later, approximately, I was organising a speaker to come to my event, another spiritual teacher, and we were going to have a sat down, we were going to sit in truth, and we were going to share that space of meditation. And we were talking on the laptop, and she said to me a few words, and we were trying to organise this event, and between the words that we were speaking, the silence just got wider and wider, and we fell into that space between words. And then we've just got the giggles. We were just giggling about nothing and trying to organise this event. It wasn't really happening. And then we had a giggle, and then everything kind of quietened down, and we got a few things put in the diary, and then I just closed my laptop and went to grab my cup of tea. I was in my room at my old house, and my tea was on the side next to me on my dressing table. And I brought my cup, and I just looked at my cup, and it was like the universe was in my cup. And I realized that things were not the same. I didn't know what had actually happened, but then what seemed to unfold from this was a series of realizations and experiences that were just totally beyond mind. So as I was looking in my cup, I recognized that there was no separation between me, the cup, and the tea. And I could just see the universe in this cup. And I was like, whoa, what is in the tea? And then I looked over on my dressing table, I got a mirror, and I looked in the mirror, and I could see myself looking at myself from outside myself. So it was like, I'm connected to everything. I'm not my body. And then I stood up, and everything just disappeared. All the walls started moving in waves, and then just went. And there I was just thrown into a space of pure consciousness, pure awareness, pure nothingness. No me, no identity of any kind. But there were recognitions, there were insights were dropping in. So this is death, because there's no me, and there's no life, and there's nothing here. And then a recognition that we are not limited by death. Death isn't the end. That we are eternal, essentially. And not an idea of it, and knowing a full body immersion into the experience of what it is to die before you die. And a recognition that all the suffering comes from the mind. And then at some part in this, I remember, and it was perhaps before that actually, I remember my mum ringing me. I was meant to go and pick her up, and I just said, there's no way I can drive the car. Like, I literally I don't have a clue how to drive a car right now. It's like that part of my brain that could drive a car had left the building, literally. And so she said, oh, don't worry, I'll come and get you. And then all this kind of happened after that. And at some point where I was stood up, I decided I was going to go downstairs, probably to like wait for my mom, I guess. And I don't remember walking down the stairs. There was a very strong sense of just floating down the stairs. And when I got downstairs, somehow I'd got an apple in my bag. I think I must have felt hungry and remembered, or some part of me knew there was an apple in my bag. Anyway, I got this apple out and I looked at it and I couldn't eat it because it was the most incredibly beautiful apple I'd ever seen. And it just looked like the universe in my hand. And I was crying and laughing, and there was this overwhelming kind of understanding, if you like, that I was being shown something. I was being shown, and it felt like God was letting me see the truth. And all that stuff that I'd felt about myself, that had the arguments going on in my head, and all the suffering that I'd been experiencing, before all of these shifts, it was just so clear to me in those moments that that was a joke. That it was just the most ridiculous thing ever. And that's not to say that anyone in suffering of any kind, it isn't their experience, because when you're in it, you're in it. And then after that, my mom picked me up. We went round a very well-known chemist, and I just laughed the whole time. My mum was very patient with me. She didn't seem to get annoyed. And I got in the car and I literally saw what I can only describe as the mind come back, the thought processes really come back in. But this time I was aware of it. So it came in and I was looking at it from another angle, sort of thing. And honestly, I had no idea what any of this meant. I knew I'd experienced something. I didn't really know what I'd experienced. And it took me quite a few months to integrate this experience, because it literally obliterated all my beliefs, all my conditionings, my thoughts about anything, about what life is, who I am, anything. Anyone that was arguing about anything, I couldn't understand at all. I was just like, wow, it's literally minds arguing with another mind. They're like the actual being of the person, that's just nothing to do with it. It was just like this really interesting knowing that everything that I built up that was me just collapsed. It didn't mean anything. My name just seemed very irrelevant, and it was like God had just come along and got a cloth and gone, right, we're just going to wipe that slate clean. We're going to start again now. So that's who you were up to that point. But after that recognition, you're now something has been recognized and seen, and you're not who you were prior to that. And I just don't think anyone can be. I don't think you can have your identity and your whole being disintegrate and still say, oh yeah, that's me.
Yeah, you could say it's like an ego death or a rebirth, an opportunity to recreate yourself. But I'd imagine that experience, though it sounds blissful, but also extremely quite scary, you know. We have our ego to protect us, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It is there to keep us safe. And you know, that loss of identity, if you like, it's quite scary, right?
It's quite interesting because that was one thing I was so grateful of. None of it scared me. There was
Okay.
nothing about it that scared me. And the whole experience, it was like being a child in Wonderland and just watching everything, just watching
Mm.
life expand and things fall away. And it was it really was a beautiful experience. It was the kind of aftermath, if you like, of integrating what that now meant. And there was something within me as well that recognized that this was for everybody. I realized after a time that I'd had the experience that had been spoken about millions of times, that people had said, oh, you know, you have to live in a cave in India to have these kind of depth of spiritual awakenings, and all this kind of mythological stuff that I'd read, you know. And some of the things that I'd read, not much actually, about Osho and his experiences, and it just seemed like, yes, but this is actually for everyone. If this can happen to me, this can actually happen to anybody at any time. And there were no plant medicines were involved. Nobody else was involved. No drugs were involved. No medication was involved. It was the moment, the ripeness of the moment, and the ripeness of my soul, spirit, if you like. And it was the flowering, you know, the flowering of human consciousness that we are all here for. This is the spirit, ironically, this is the spiritual journey. And then it doesn't end, because after these realizations, then there's integration that has to happen. And then there could be more realizations through those realizations, and a deepening into more of what we're becoming. But once you have witnessed, once you've seen, you can't unsee it. It's absolutely impossible to unsee it. And I know there is a lot of talk at the moment about, you know, to be woke or awake, or there's a lot of terms that are being used. And I feel there is quite a mass confusion with what it means to be aware of things that are happening in the world, and what it actually means to be spiritually aware. And the two things are quite different. They are linked in some ways, but they're actually very, very different. And I also noticed that through this awakening, people started to come to me, and it became clear over time that part of this awakening was for me to help others to experience the presence of themselves. And this takes me back to when I was in my 20s and I was dedicating my life to God and helping people know themselves on the deepest level and heal themselves. And all of a sudden there was that recognition, well, this is how I'm doing that now. This is how that's going to be done. That holding the space and guiding people into that space within themselves, so they can have that realization, they can have that recognition, and they can be free from that suffering, or at least recognize that suffering for a while or a time. And it was just really interesting how everything just started to shift from that point. And yeah, all kinds of very unusual things started to happen.
It sounds fascinating, and it's I'm sure the viewers, if they've experienced that, can relate, and to people that have never experienced that, it sounds a bit mad, doesn't it, really? It can sound like wow, but it is real, it does happen. And I don't know if you can answer this, but it's something that I'm curious about. And why do you think it happens to some people and not others?
I think that's a really good question. And I feel like, I mean, obviously I can only speak from my own experience and my own perspective, point of awareness. And I would say that as evolving beings, as eternal beings, being in a body, I fully believe that we experience eternal life, meaning that we experience lifetimes after lifetimes, many different levels. And I would say that it's simply the point that everyone is at a different place in their awakening of their consciousness. So we all come to experience being in a body in this place we call Earth, and many of us are at different stages in our awareness, in our journey. And what I would also say is that awakening is God coming to know itself as many, because it cannot know itself as one. Although we are all one, there has to be many of us for that experience to be possible, because we can't experience what it is to be an awakening consciousness if there's just one.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all, and through the process of awakening, we are also helping to awaken naturally others around us as well by being that space of presence. So I think the reason that some people don't have that experience is because maybe they're not ready for it. Maybe it's not what they really truly want. Maybe they've come here to experience something totally different. I don't think there's a right or a wrong about it. I think it's simply that some of us are just generally more committed to our spiritual path. Maybe that may even be a part of it. I mean, for me, certainly from a very young age, as you know now, this has been my journey. So in some way, it almost seems inevitable that would be a part of it, right? And I think for those that are truly seeking and are willing to go within themselves and to keep going within and exploring the inner world, I think when we truly want to knock on that door, the door does open. And actually we often find that it was never shut in the first place. So I think it's priorities, isn't it, in life? It's what people feel is most important for them in their journey.
That's it. So much to ponder and to unpick in what you've said there. And I'm sure it's going to be thought provoking for many people watching. And one of the things that I've been thinking about, along my own journey is that, when we come in as souls and we say, yeah, that looks good, Earth School, we'll dive right in and we're going to have this human experience. It's almost like the soul has got its memory card, if you like, and it's white. We can't remember our past lives. And then I feel like as the timeline, as you go along your journey, your timeline, and you, like you mentioned earlier, that it's this surrender and you're seeking almost for the next step, please update this memory. I'm ready for the next remembrance of the soul. And it's like we just can't remember what we've signed up to. So we are children in that sense, and literally. But yeah, it's just something that's been dawning on me the last few days, really. And it's like we're all ready to go, but we just can't remember the journey. And then when we truly surrender and say, I want more, I want to, progress in this spiritual path, it knows when you're ready. And it's like, here's the next bit that you've forgotten about, and you're ready now. And depending on people's experiences and what they've kind of signed up for, and like you say, some people, that's not going to be their bag. They just want to come in, have a very 3D experience, and that's wonderful. And that's why we just shouldn't judge, because we are all on this unique individual journey. And yeah, it's just something that I've been thinking about.
Yeah. I was gonna put a bit of a light on because
Yeah, it was going a bit dark there. Yeah,
yeah,
that's great.
I don't know if that's too bright now, but
That's okay this end. Yeah, that's fine.
okay. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think it is very much to do with what people want out of life, what they prioritize and what's important to them. And I also feel that there are still many people that aren't really interested in a spiritual aspect of living. They don't even really know that it's a possibility to experience that. And so in that case, it's something that you don't know is a possibility. So how can you really care whether you experience it or not? And even from my perspective, I had no idea that the way that was going to happen and when that was going to happen. I'd certainly had a lot of spiritual experiences, as I mentioned before, from being a young child, and psychic experiences and all kinds of things. But I didn't know that it would unfold that way and affect me in that way, and then I would choose to, or maybe not even choose, but the universe would kind of lay out this pathless path for me that would involve working with people in a very different way than what I'd expected when I finished my foundation degree in complementary therapies, for example. So I think that life has a path, and sometimes, particularly if we look back, which I don't tend to do too often, you can see the kind of way that everything has worked in, and how everything is cleverly designed to create this magic that we experience. And always I think I've also recognized that in life is perfection. Everything in life is perfection, even when we have really great challenges and not very nice experiences, things we definitely wouldn't want to experience. But there is a perfection in all of it, because it makes us who we are, and it grows our spirit in the way that it needs. And we are all expanding consciousness. So we have to keep expanding and expanding into more of what we are and experiencing what that is. I think in the process of awakening, and certainly after a Kundalini awakening, a spontaneous awakening, we become very much more present with everything, with life, with our emotions, with our feelings, with our thoughts, with our experiences, and with people around us. It just completely transforms the way we experience life and the way that we experience ourselves. And from that perspective, you could say that we are living in a totally different dimension to many other people that are not having those experiences. And that's how I look at different dimensions of experience now, through the levels of awareness and consciousness and experience, spiritual experience. It seems that we live in one world, but at the same time there are many worlds within that world, and it's always our inner world that we are experiencing in our outer world. So the more peace we can find within us, and the more we can allow ourselves to surrender to life and allow and accept these spiritual experiences that happen, the more we can expand into, just expand into this great melting pot of consciousness, I guess, that we are. I think we reach a point when, sorry,
it glitched out. I don't know if that was my end or yours. You just start to say you think, and then it cut.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to ask me anything else?
Yeah, so I mean, you've given us a lot to think about already, and it is all so fascinating. So thank you for so eloquently explaining your experiences and just sharing that really. Yeah, so thank you. Can we talk about some of the events that you run and coming up to the present day? 'Cause I know you're involved in a lot of events, and I'm hoping to join the one in Nantwich in October, I believe. Let's talk about some of the stuff you're up to currently.
Oh, lovely. Yes, that's a great idea. So I'm now running events called Elevate Your Mind. The focus of all the events is what I've just spoken about. So there are lots of different elements to it, but essentially it's to help people in their awakening journey, and to also help them understand their health, find out information about well-being, and just have a space where people can come and they can find more peace, more joy, find answers to questions that they have. And also we have stands and exhibitioners and stalls that, you know, for example, if you want to create a little sacred space in your home where you meditate, so we have people selling joss sticks and crystals and things of that nature, so that you can create a nice little space. And we have meditation. I offer something called Darshan, which is really what I'm offering now, as well as one-to-ones. And my Darshan is to help people who are either going through an awakening, or to connect to that presence and open up that possibility within them, and help them to see beyond the veils, beyond the illusions. So we also have different speakers, healers, so people can come and they can relax, they can get treatments, they can listen to amazing speakers, and it's a really beautiful space for people to connect with themselves. And I'm hoping that everyone that comes there receives some healing, some insights, gets encouraged, inspired, and feels joy, to be in that space. And there's a lot of information coming from the people that speak there. So it's not an everyday occurrence, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I've been having a little nosy since we've been connected, and just having a look at the sort of caliber of people that are there, and genuinely thinking, oh, that's right up my street. And so it's very aligned that we've connected. And I think, oh, well, that's fantastic. That's, part of my path as well. And just looking forward to, just seeing what it's all about. How many people would you be expecting to be there? Is it quite a big event?
Yeah, it's 2 days. It's in the centre of Nantwich, at Nantwich Civic Hall. And the one in March, we had about 210 people. So I'm hoping we'll have at least 210, perhaps a few more. I'm going to be doing a lot of, the practical side of being a spiritual teacher is a lot of Facebook and social media stuff as well. So yeah, my life is quite a mix at the moment.
Yeah, no, it sounds fascinating. So, because you've mentioned about your various gifts and whatnot, and obviously you do these events, what else is it that you offer day to day for clients? I'm just curious to know, how do you earn your pennies in this matrix?
Great question. So through the events mostly, and through my one-to-one work as well. So people will come and see me, and they may have stuff going on in their life. They may need some healing with something or some direction. They may have spiritual questions. It seems to be that when I work with people, I'm kind of working with them as a whole on all levels, on the spiritual, on the physical, on the mental, emotional. And one of the things that I found very powerful, that I've used a lot through my own experiences with my own emotions, is really helping people to master their emotions, helping them to not get overwhelmed with how they're feeling, and teaching them tools to help them when they're really struggling with things. And this kind of leads on to addiction and medication and things like that. And it seems to have helped people get off those things. Not everyone, but most people that I've worked with have managed to really turn their lives around in big ways. It's been quite amazing to see the transformation in the people that I've worked with, actually. And of course, it's not all comes from me, it's through me.
Yeah.
I'm a conduit for it. I'm a conduit for the energy, for the presence, for the healing, and that.
Oh, it sounds like you're doing some fantastic work in the world, and just wishing you the best of luck with all the future events, and hoping to make one of them, as I say. I'll share all the links, and your social links. Where's the best place that people can make contact with you, Dhyan?
I would say Facebook, actually. So either my Elevate Your Mind Facebook page, or my website, elevateyourmind.life, or my other Facebook, Dhyan G. I also have Instagram as well, which is elevateyourmind.life. So there are quite a few places actually people can reach me these days. And if you see this and you want to email me, it's Dhyan at elevateyourmind.life, even. To know my own website. So it'd be lovely to connect with people and work with them one-to-one. That's definitely one of the things that I really love, is working with people one-to-one.
You enjoy the one-to-one work. That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. I do like working with groups as well. I love giving darshan with groups and helping people move into that space of meditation and presence. It's really beautiful work, and I'm very grateful that I've been given these gifts to share.
Well, thank you for sharing a snippet of your story and sharing with us your experiences. And I will share all the links, which I'll grab off you afterwards. And any closing thoughts or sentiments from you, Dhyan?
I feel like I've shared so much.
Yeah, you've given us a plethora, yes.
Yeah. Well, I would just like to say to whoever sees this and whenever you see this, that just know that you're never alone, and that no matter how difficult life can be, things can change very, very quickly. And don't give up, because you're far greater, far more powerful, and far more needed than you realize.
That's beautiful. That's a lovely place for us to close. So once again, thank you so much for joining me, Dhyan. And yeah, just looking forward to seeing more of your work. So wishing you a lot of love. So namaste. Thank you ever so much.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Tamsin. It's been really
Thank you.
beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks so much.